You learned how to read a room before you learned how to read a book. You knew the sound of a door closing wrong, the silence that meant something was coming. And somewhere in that house, you stopped being a child and started being a manager of moods, of peace, of people twice your size.
This is real footage from 1965. A baby raised in a stable home, given nothing more than a couple of wooden blocks. Watch how easily she reaches. No hesitation, no checking who's watching. The world is just safe enough to touch. Now watch this child, same age almost, same blocks, same table. But something is different before he even moves. His hand hovers, retreats. His eyes drift away from the object, like the block isn't the thing he's actually watching for. This baby was raised without that same steady presence, and what you're seeing isn't shyness, it's a nervous system that has already learned this early not to expect anyone to be there.
What you just saw is real archival footage, a 1965 clinical film documenting infants raised in two very different conditions. One child, raised in a stable home, reaches for the world without hesitation, curious, absorbed, unafraid. The other, separated from a consistent caregiver, goes still, anxious, withdrawn into themselves, finding comfort in nothing but their own hands. The film's narration leans on some psychological theories from its era that haven't held up well since, but the behavior on screen didn't need a theory to be true. What it captured decades before the language existed to properly explain it is something attachment researchers would later confirm again and again. A child without a reliable source of safety doesn't just feel afraid, they quietly stop reaching for things. That stillness isn't peace, it's a nervous system that has learned not to expect anyone to come. Most people never lived in an institution. Most people had a bedroom, a family, a normal-looking childhood. But that same stillness, that same quiet calculation shows up in homes that look completely fine from the outside. It turns out this is far more common than it feels when you're inside it. Across more than a decade of national health surveys in the United States, researchers have found that nearly 2 out of every 2 adults report at least one difficult or harmful experience from childhood, and almost 1 in 5 report 4 or more. The most common of these weren't dramatic, they were quieter things: a parent's emotional unavailability, a divorce, a house where one person's instability set the temperature for everyone else. So if you grew up like this, you were not unlucky in some rare, isolating way. You were one of a very large number of people raised by people who were, in their own way, still children themselves. Here's the strange part. The children who grow up like this rarely become the angriest adults in the room. They become the most competent ones, the fixers, the ones who read tension in a text message before it's even been sent. Because somewhere very early, a calculation got made, quietly, beneath language. If I am good enough, careful enough, useful enough, the house will stay calm. It wasn't true, but it worked enough times to become a personality. There's an old word for what happens next, not in the child's behavior, but in what the parent passes down without ever meaning to. And once you hear it, you may never look at your own family the same way again. In 1954, the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung wrote something that has quietly haunted family psychology ever since. In his collected works, he argued that the more a parent refuses to face their own unresolved pain while still appearing accomplished, composed, even admirable, the more that unfinished pain gets passed downward, not through words, through atmosphere. Jung called it the unlived life of the parent. His claim, in plain terms, nothing shapes a child more deeply than the parts of a parent's life that parent never let themselves feel. This wasn't about cruelty. Most of these parents weren't villains. They were often just as frightened, just as unfinished as the children they were raising, except no one was managing their moods. so the child did it instead. And here's the detail that rarely makes it into the quote graphics. Jung didn't think perfect parents would solve this either. He wrote that flawless parents would actually be a kind of catastrophe, leaving children no path forward except moral inferiority or rebellion that just becomes a mirror image of the very thing they were rebelling against. Either way, he said, the pattern doesn't disappear in one generation, it waits for the next one to deal with. This is also, separately, what Freud was circling decades earlier, when he noticed something stranger than simple unhappiness, that people don't just remember old pain, they unconsciously recreate it in new rooms with new people, getting nothing from it but the same old ache. Jung was describing where the pattern is planted, Freud was describing why it keeps growing back. So if you find yourself now choosing partners who need fixing, apologizing for things that weren't your fault, feeling unsafe in rooms that are actually calm because calm wasn't something your nervous system was ever taught to trust, this is not a character flaw you need to white-knuckle your way out of. It's an inheritance, and inheritances can be looked at, named, and slowly set down. You did not choose the house you grew up in. You did not choose to become the calmest person in a room that was never calm. But you get to choose what happens with the very last version of that pattern, the one currently living in you. The question Jung leaves us with isn't whose fault was it? It's quieter than that. What part of someone else's unlived life have you been quietly living out as your own?